السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أرحب بالسيد فرانسيس ريتشاردوني، هو نائب رئيس مركز الأطلنطي ومدير مركز رفيق الحريري للشرق الأوسط. مركز الأطلنطي هو ما يسمى بالثينك تانك أو مجمع للمفكرين مختص بالعلاقات الدولية، تم تأسيسه عام 61 ليقدم مشورات مختلفة فيما يتعلق بالسياسة الدولية والأعمال، وأيضا يضم مجموعة من المفكرين وقادة الفكر. 10 مراكز تابعة لهذا المركز، ولديها العديد من البرامج التي ترتبط بالأمن الدولي والرخاء الاقتصادي العالمي. المركز الرئيسي في واشنطن دي سي. برحب بالسيد فرانسيس ريتشاردوني، Vice President Atlantic Center and Director رفيق الحريري Center for the Middle East. مبروك.
شكرا جزيلا أستاذ أسامة.
You speak English, Turkish, Arabic, French and Italian. Shall we proceed in English or Arabic because I only speak two?
كما تحب، يعني ممكن نحول بالعربي، إنما للأسف الشديد لازم يتعود تاني، ما بكلمش بطلاقة زي الأول.
زي الأول لما كنت في مصر.
لما كنت هنا في شوارع مصر.
في شوارع مصر.
في أم الدنيا.
وموالد مصر.
الموالد المصرية.
طيب، قبل ما نبتدي، هل عندك رسالة عايز تقولها للمشاهدين المصريين وانت في زيارتك لمصر الأول؟
لا، ما عنديش رسالة ذاتا من مواطن خاص دلوقتي، وليست
لا تمثل الحكومة.
لا أمثل الحكومة الأمريكية. أنا وزوجتي ماري سعداء جدا جدا إن رجعنا هنا تاني لأم الدنيا. كان وحشنا قوي كلكم والنيل وكله، وعشان كده سعداء جدا جدا نرجع هنا.
Right, let's switch to English. The motto of the council is renewing the Atlantic community for global challenges. Are we the global challenges?
Together we face global challenges. That's the premise of the Atlantic Council. It was started in the Cold War years to sustain American popular support for relations with Europe. Now, in more recent years, the premise is that Europe and the United States together have a responsibility to collaborate with other partners around the world, wherever we find them, in solving the problems of the different regions. So we have these specialty centers that you mentioned, and I have the privilege of leading the Middle East Center. My thought is we in the West do not have better ideas than you do. We don't have better wisdom than you do. All my experience in the Middle East, and especially in Egypt, tells me that the solutions for this region, for the problems here, will come from the region, and it should be upon us from outside, who are friends, to identify shared values, shared purposes, and find where we can build the partnerships to be effective. That's what we're about.
So your diplomatic, political, military career has extended for about 36 years.
It did.
And those 36 years you've served mostly in the Middle East or in areas around the Middle East.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me more about them? Except, of course, when you went to the Far East. So can you tell me how the sequence went along those 36 years?
Well, the two poles of attraction most of the time have been Egypt and Turkey, which, of course, historically have had the most intimate of relations. I'm very saddened to see the tensions in the relationship now. I think it's unnatural. I think it's a good thing, it's an important thing for the region, for the major players in this part of the world to collaborate for the shared purposes of stability, for security, and not least for prosperity, for the future. When I was here in Egypt before, your government of the time negotiated a free trade agreement with Turkey, which was a great accomplishment. My government was talking with your government at the time. We tried to do that, and for extraneous political reasons we failed to do it. But you did succeed with Turkey, and your trade and investment were good and growing, and unfortunately the politics of the moment have led to some setbacks even in the trade relationship. I hope you get that back on track.
Right, but you were not only here in Egypt as an ambassador, you were here at the start of your career back in the 1980s. Is this true?
That's right. I was here early in my career, as I was also in Turkey early in my career. I also came here as a tourist before I was a diplomat. My wife and I, at the time, had the privilege of being here really at the historic inflection point. President Sadat had only a few months before gone to Jerusalem and changed the world.
Okay.
Changed the world. And when we came around Christmas of that year, I suppose 77, Begin was returning his visit. And I saw the excitement in the streets of Cairo and the strangeness. People didn't know what to make of it.
Of course, it was not very well understood by the people.
It was not understood. It was strange, but people were talking about it and were nervous and anxious and yet hopeful, because the dream of peace after a generation of war was huge. So as simple tourists, accidentally, we were in Cairo for a big historic moment.
That's in the 70s.
That was in the 70s.
But you returned in the 80s to work with the embassy.
I did.
And you had, back then, you started communicating with the Muslim Brotherhoods at the time.
We saw everybody in the political spectrum. I set about trying to learn about this great country, its history and its politics. The country was opening anew. It had been, before that, President Sadat had had the economic infitah, an opening. Under President Mubarak, there was continued, very gradual opening, economically and politically. So I was here in the mid-80s when the Muslim Brothers were emerging and allowed to run for parliament, so naturally we would see them. I met the people in the Waft. I had the privilege of meeting some of the surviving free officers from the revolution, the great Muhyiddin. I had the privilege of meeting him and his Tegemwa party at the time. So it spanned the spectrum.
And you used to go to everybody to their offices, not only the Brotherhood that used to go to them in downtown, in their downtown office.
It was rare to see them. A few times, a handful of times. I saw their activities in the neighborhoods. But I met with all kinds of different political parties and civil society leaders, journalists, newspaper editors, all kinds of people. And I went into the countryside. It was so much fun going to the Delta, you know, to Tanta, Sayd al-Badawi, going up to Said. I loved going up there, to Asyut and Minya.
And there were lots of question marks, I remember, at the time about whenever you made any of those moves. It was only your passion or it was part of your job?
Both.
Both.
It was certainly both. You know, one is very lucky in life if you were paid to do what you love doing. And I loved learning languages. I loved meeting different people from different cultures and religions and traditions. And here I was, a diplomat. It was my profession to do it. So it was like being a tourist, only better, because I had the privilege of calling on officials, high officials, low officials, newspaper people, community activists and leaders.
But the press used to frown about your visits. You remember that?
You know, sure. I mean, it's part of the culture. What is this foreigner doing running around here? What is he up to? What is his purpose? I would explain, but they would never believe.
Do you think we're xenophobic?
No. I don't think. It depends what you mean. If you mean by xenophobic fearing or hating or disliking the foreigners, there's a caution and a distrust that comes from history, oddly combined with the most huge and heartfelt warmth and welcome and hospitality. So it's a peculiar combination. And my experience as an individual with any Egyptian individuals or families was the warmth and the friendship. Even if they were suspicious about what is this American about, they looked at me as a human, brought me into their homes, in the Delta, in the Said, in the Sinai, in Siwa.
The reason I asked you if we were xenophobic or were suspicious is some people said that you were the mastermind of communication between the United States and the Brotherhood.
I'm not sure what that
Or
means.
the engineer, let me say the engineer.
I think they would be shocked to hear that. I was a very junior diplomat, and that I wasn't a master. That gives me great credit. Thank you, but
no.
I had a very simple job. It was to go out, try to understand this country, do reporting and analysis, get all points of view. The messages I gave was just statements of American policy and values, what we wanted, to explain to people when they would ask, what are you doing? Why are you seeing these people, those people? What about Israel? What about peace? What about this? What about that? That's what I did.
All right, so you were summoned by Mrs. Clinton to serve in Afghanistan, by Miss Albright to Iraq, as you used to work with the anti-Saddam opposition.
I did.
By Mr. Colin Powell for the anti-terrorism coalition.
That's right.
Then you were summoned from Manila to put together the embassy in Baghdad.
You've done your homework.
I've done my homework.
You have done your homework.
So, were you the one who always serves or actually saves the day for the U.S.?
Well, you can point to a lot of things I failed to accomplish in my career, but I've always been called upon. It's been a great privilege to have been called upon to serve in places of difficulty and challenge. I've relished that. I've enjoyed that. I've enjoyed the challenge of trying to understand people who think very differently than we do, who speak a different language, who perceive America in a way that I think very often is, I think of it as a cardboard cutout, a kind of cartoon. You know, you see America through Hollywood movies, and people imagine a cowboy or the image of a soldier or
Rambo.
something, or Rambo. And you know, there's a little truth in every caricature, but it's not the whole truth. And in the same way, Americans often see the Arab world, or the Muslim world, or Egypt, as a cartoon, a suicidal person, people cutting off heads. You know, that's not, it's not truth. It's false. It's a terrible, dangerous false thing. But there are many Americans who are afraid to come here, who think that this is typical of this
This is what
part of the world.
happens on the street every day.
Yeah, and there's a tiny bit of truth. There are terrible people who dare to take the name of God and a great religion while they're committing the worst crimes. But they are not representative. They are as shocking to you as they are to me.
Even more.
Even you should be more disgusted.
Because they look like us, they talk the same language, and this is why it shocks us even more.
And they dare to speak in your name. As a foreigner, I've had the privilege of being in the homes of Egyptians, of non-Arab Muslims, of Turks, Muslims in the Philippines. I know the humanity of people, and I know how odd and strange that is. No wonder you have conspiracy theories. Normal people cannot accept that these monsters have anything in common. So you imagine that your enemies are creating these monsters, but these monsters are there. And instead of fighting with each other, we who share common values of faith, of decency, of dreams for our children, we have to see them as your enemy and our enemy together, and not have us blame all Egyptians for these crazy people.
So how come not all of us can see that they are the enemy? How come, I don't want to drag you into a talk about the administration, because you are, as you said, representing yourself, but still, from a point of view, why is the United States administration not admitting clearly that these are monsters? Because they are monsters, aren't they? I mean,
Of course they are.
whether the ones in Sinai, the ones in Iraq, the ones in Syria, or the ones that came out of the revolution of the 30th of June, who were out on the streets here with Al-Qaeda flags and ISIL flags on the streets. How come somebody is there who says, no, I can't see that they are really monsters?
Well, I don't know who those people are, but
Do you want me to name them?
in my country, I can't think of any Americans, no one in the administration or in the opposition, who fails to see the hideousness of Daesh, the Ansar Beit Maqdis. So even the names are disgusting to me. The people who are killing Egyptian
Daesh
policemen.
sounds like a real foul word.
Well, not only that, all the others who call themselves, you know, followers of the Holy House, they are appropriating
very
religious
fake.
terms and wrapping themselves in religion in a way that seems to me worse than a crime. It's certainly a crime, but it ought to be sinful. And yet they claim that they are the arbiters of religion.
Yeah, but Daesh and all these are there, but we say they are in the same basket with those who go every Friday and they burn down a public bus or a public metro or even a trash truck or any of these, rampage the streets, shoot in the air, do whatever it is. And this has been going on ever since the 3rd of July 2013. How come we see that and the West doesn't see that? Let me not talk about the administration. Let me talk about the media. That's easier. You can always blame the media.
Of course.
So how come? How come we have this point of view and not everybody else can see this point of view? Somebody with a gun on the street.
Yeah. As I say, honestly, says Ossama, I don't know any thoughtful, either official or even people in the media who see the violent criminals, the terrorists, as somehow representative of the ordinary people of this region, of Egypt in particular. This is a culture, particularly in Egypt, that is famous for its gentleness. You know, the sweetness of the culture, the revulsion for violence. I don't know if those who would claim that they are typical, I think just have it all wrong. I'm sure there are some, but it's a very ignorant view.
All right, let me get back to you personally. So you're an anti-terrorism expert. You served several times in positions of the sort. Why aren't you advising or giving consultancy to Mr. Sisi or even Mr. Obama or anyone who needs actually to learn more about countering terrorism?
Well, I think President Sisi doesn't need my advice. He has excellent Egyptian advisors. And to the extent he wishes official American advice, there'll be a new wonderful American ambassador here soon. I know him. He's a good man.
Tell me about him.
I've known him a little bit over a lot of years. He's coming from one of the hardest of diplomatic assignments in Baghdad, where he did a fine job. He served in Jordan before that. He served in high office in Washington. He's an excellent listener and analyst and a gentle man, a man of good manners. So I think he'll be a natural fit here in Egypt. As to President Obama and advising him, you know, countering terrorism is really important. The president has all kinds of fine advisors. I had the privilege of serving his administration. For me, the counterterrorism story is important. We must succeed. We've got to put all our best brains and talent behind it. But I think the strategic agenda of the United States and its partners in Europe and in this region ought to be larger and more positive. There seems to me to be a crisis of legitimacy of states outside of Egypt in this region. Egypt has a strong state. We can debate the nature of it, but there's no question about the Egyptian national identity and state. It's not true in Iraq. That's not true in Syria. Look at poor Libya.
But I mean, they used to be states.
They were states. They were 20th century creations that failed, as we saw. You know, Tunis is working hard. Tunisia is processing its way through as a modern state and democracy. We wish them success. The states of the Gulf seem to be successful and working their way forward. But for me, I would hope that the American and European agenda with partners like Egypt, the Gulf states, civil society partners in this region would have a positive agenda. As you decide your way into the future, what kind of economy you want for your children, what kind of education, what kind of civil society, what kind of democracy he wants.
So do we want to keep these countries intact, or we'd say, come on, let's have 3 Iraqs and 2 Libyas and 3 Syrias because we think this is better for the people over there, that's more prosperous for them?
You know, even if people in the West have opinions on those questions, those opinions don't matter. The days of Mr. Sykes and Picot are gone.
No, I mean, you said the US, Europe, and Egypt should be working for, and the Gulf states
Sure.
should be working for the benefit of these countries.
Yes.
But, I mean, one of the things that was so much announced was for the benefit of the people of a nation was that of Sudan. And then all of a sudden we just have 2 Sudans and both of them are failing.
Look, what I mean to say is you are ashab al-biladi. You are the owners, you are the masters of your fate. You, Egyptians and other peoples of the region, you will decide what you want to do, where you want to go. We do care. I'm not saying we're indifferent. We shouldn't be indifferent. If we're indifferent, then it's really going to be a problem. We do care about shared interests and values. And when we see people who are partners for stability, for human dignity, for governments that serve their peoples and respect their peoples, that are legitimate in the eyes of their peoples, then we can work together. We can do projects in science and technology and health, education.
But first of all, these countries need to be countries again.
They need to get their acts together and articulate their dreams. In Egypt, your act has been together for at least, well, literally together since King Mina, 5,000 years ago. And even before that, you had a civilization here.
Can I just ask you one simple, very, very simple question, direct to the point?
Mhm.
Is there a conspiracy?
Is there a conspiracy? Almost certainly there are conspiracies. There are people who try to oppose that which is good and decent. But I think what you're referring to is foreign-backed conspiracies against Egypt or against the region. For me, that's a nonsense, to be very honest. There are opinions. Sure, ask Americans, ask Europeans what they think, what should be, and you'll find lots of different opinions. But I do not believe that there are foreign-backed plots to, like in the movies, or like in the old days there were, to bring this or that party to power, to prevent the success of our friends. It goes against all of my experience. On the contrary, at least in my experience in American diplomacy, we cared about the success of our friends and partners, especially the heavyweight, influential, pivotal friends and partners like Egypt. For us, that's a strong view, it's a strong interest. For you, it's a vital interest. Your national security, your national prosperity is vitally important to you and your family and your children. You live here, your wealth is here, your life is here. For us, your success will contribute to our prosperity and our security. Your failure will hurt us too, but not as badly as it will hurt you. So why would we not want your success? Why would any responsible party in the West not want Egypt to succeed?
You personally were accused of being part of the conspiracy in Turkey by Mr. Erdogan.
Yes.
Were you part of the conspiracy against Turkey?
No, that was as nonsensical an idea. At one unfortunate moment, the Prime Minister of Turkey was seriously misinformed by conspiracy thinkers. When he was correctly informed, the issue went away. And the Prime Minister and I had very respectful and professional communications. He was very hospitable to me. He received me. He came to events celebrating Turkish-American economic and business projects. So we understood each other very well, and there are respectful relations between Turkey and the United States.
He almost considered you as a persona non grata.
At one point, when he was under severe internal stress from one faction of his own party, someone convinced him there was a conspiracy and that the Americans were to blame. he
Is that
later
possible?
was.
Is there a leader of a country with the size of Turkey who could live under somebody coming to whisper in his ears, watch out, the prince wants to kill you? I mean, this is not Hamlet anymore.
You know, I'd rather not focus on Turkish politics. They're a lively democracy with many points of view, lots of passion, a polarized society. They're good friends of the United States. They're treaty allies. We care about Turkey's security and prosperity too. In fact, I'm departing for Turkey tomorrow. We have a conference there. Vice President Biden will be visiting. As I mentioned at the outset, we'd like stronger relations between the United States and Turkey, and stronger normal relations between Turkey and all its neighbors, including Egypt.
I know you want to leave the Turkey issue, and you're going to Turkey tomorrow, but I just have one more question.
Sure.
While in Turkey, you said on December the 20th, last December, following those allegations of corruptions that were made, that your advices have not been noted, and now we watch the fall of an empire. Were you mistaken about the fall of that Ottoman Empire, or you still see it will fall?
But Ossama, you've done your homework, but not fully. Those were precisely the wrong. That was the lie. It was a lie that was told to the Prime Minister. I never said any such thing, and the Foreign Minister knew it. And when the lie was corrected, everything went back to normal, and we were fine. But that was a lie. Why would I ever say
Which he
such
corrected
thing?
in June, saying Turkey and the US stand on equal footing in respecting freedom of expression and the press.
I need to see the context of what that was.
You said Turkey and the US stand on equal footing in respecting freedom of expression and the press.
Yeah, those are shared values. It's in their law. You know,
Though they repress the...
whether they live up to it is another question in all cases. So that's why I want to see the context of where you got the line. We'll see about it. I've spoken very frankly about internal subjects in Turkey, but I did not come here to criticize Turkey.
No, of course not. Let me not talk about Turkey. Let me move to something else. Let me move to Kobani. This is away from Turkey.
I'm not very far away from Turkey.
Well, it's just 1 mile away from Turkey.
It's on the border.
How do you see the crisis there?
I see
humanitarian,
yeah,
and how the world is talking about moving, but it's not really moving. Of course, Turkey, my friend Erdogan is not doing much about it. How do you see this disaster that we're seeing in the making? And it looks like humanity doesn't learn the lessons.
Yeah.
We keep on seeing, just like we've seen before in Bosnia, and we've seen in places, we move after the disaster happens.
The whole Syrian story is a horrible humanitarian tragedy, one of the worst of our times. There are more people who have been displaced from their homes inside Syria and then outside Syria. And if you throw in the people from Iraq who've suffered as well, I saw somewhere the other day, it's over 13 million people, about the size of the population of London. It's horrible to imagine. And that's just those who are still living, never mind whatever the latest number is. Well over 100,000, maybe close to 200,000 who have been killed terribly in this conflict. It is the terrible humanitarian tragedy of our times. Kobani is one very sad chapter that is still unfolding in that larger story that I believe we all have to pay attention to and do our best to mitigate and overcome.
After the break, I promise you I will only be talking about Egypt and your presence in Egypt. هناخد فاصل ونرجع نكمل هذا الحوار الحقيقة اللي أنا مستمتع بيه جدا مع سيد فرانسيس ريتشاردوني.